Hi there, I'm Dani Henderson, and my guest today is the great mentor, Dr. Chris Lemmon. Today, we are going to bring you some metaphysical tools to help you with your emotions, your mental health, your general state of being. As we know, the world is pretty all over the place, up, down, and round the corner at the moment. How do we, the individual, how do we cope with that? This great man has given me many techniques over 22 years of my life. I have shared hundreds of them on television in Great Britain, obviously online here on YouTube. And I'm so happy to bring my beloved Dr. Chris Lemmon. Hello, sir. How are you?
Great. And the good news, I'm a little bit in the shadow, which is always promising because I'm old. So the less you see me, the more you see of her, the better your experience of life will be.
I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure about that. Well, your bulb literally blew at like less than a minute ago. So
Yes. All right. So we're actually talking about techniques. And before I get into the concept techniques, when I started teaching, I really had to say, what do people need to know? Having a technique is like having a technique in a writer workshop. My goodness, I don't know how many writers workshops I did. And I don't know how many educational workshops I did. And what I learned in an educational workshop, and my partner, a woman, and I were doing workshops on education, and we were getting parents coming in, and we said, here's some techniques to make your kids smarter and wiser and do a better job. And what we found is that absolutely 100% of the people didn't utilize any of it. It was just a total waste of 2 hours of talking and doing workshops because of the fact that it's just like they really didn't, they wanted their kids to be smarter. They didn't want to be a job. They didn't want to have to do anything to make it happen. And so it's just like, oh my goodness. So I learned from all those things that we have to be able to get you in a position where you're addressing an issue for you. And then we say, try this to see if it makes a difference, if that makes any sense.
oh yeah.
So it's really important to have yes, I used to be, I don't know what, but now today I'm kind of more of a philosopher. And, a philosopher is someone who exists with some life experience, but not quite dead. So that's where I'm sitting. So the first thing I really want to philosophically talk about is pictures, because Dani and I are really, really good at being able to see what we call pictures. The term pictures in psychology, remember, I've got all this background in education. Psychology says any sensory perception, sounds, hearing, smell, all produce a picture, right? It's not just a photograph, because your brain doesn't produce a photograph like we think. It really doesn't. It produces a symbol. So basically all that data flows. I'll give you one quick example, because I'm through a million stories. There's a guy who's a climber, rock climber, climbs mountains, Yosemite, places like that, think big. He fell, so he's blind. So he has a tongue piercing, and he has a headlight. He climbs a mountain in the dark, and he has a headlight he turns on. He can see about 2 feet, and he puts a headlight up and opens his mouth and sticks his tongue out. The light reflecting to the piercing in his tongue presents enough data in his brain for him to find the edges and climb rocks. It's like, holy cow, it's amazing. So our ability to process information is what it's really kind of about. Now, we call them images, we call them pictures. I tend to call them symbols. The only difference is if I get a postcard of a castle in Europe, that's one thing. That's a picture. But if I go to Europe and take a picture of that and have that experience, I call that a symbol, because I'm engrossed in it. I went there. I have the experience of it. So to me, a symbol has a little more bite or meaning to it. But a symbol, an image, a picture, all the same things, right? And so we use those words interchangeable. And I want you to think, it's like I'm using them interchangeable for a reason. I want you to know that there are commonality. There's a slight fine difference between them, maybe just in my mind. So if you have a preference for words, that's fine. Stick with your preference. Don't look at me as beaming information. I don't ever say anything important, but sitting with someone is an experience. I don't care who you are, whether you're in love or you're angry. It's an experience you have. And so that's where you learn from, right? Not from the BS that people throw at you, right?
Mm.
So pictures are one of the things that I realized that, oh my goodness, Dani talks about me being a teacher. When she walked in the door, she's got this amazing skill with being able to see everything, right? So it's like, there it is, without a doubt. So we did a lot of work with different things. So nonetheless, she's got amazing skill, and she's been able to implement and utilize all her life. So that's just what's profound, right? So the second thing I want to talk about, if we have time, is the energy of movement. Energy is meaningless unless it moves something, right? I mean, you can have a car sitting in your garage. If you're never putting miles on it, it's meaningless. If you start it up, now you're doing something with it, right? So energy requires movement. So when we start to talk about energy, we look at like techniques that allow you to have a relationship between energy and movement. And the third thing that I'm philosophically going to talk about is stories. Gosh, when you're first born, I would say the moment of birth, you have the greatest potential you ever see in your life, because you don't have any BS stories. You do have some genetic programming. Thank you, mom and dad, and your culture, right? So you might have a gender, or you might have a skin color, or a linguistic structure. But we realize that doesn't affect kids. Kids can actually communicate in any language up to about 3, 4, 5 years old. They can understand. They start to show a bias for their culture around age 3. It's just kind of amazing. It's kind of like we really have huge potential, and we're breaking it down from the day we're born, moving in a direction of a unique potential for you. So that's the way that I start to see that when we're looking at stories. So if you look at kids, you get little kids and they say, I can't wait till I'm big enough to reach the sink. Of course, they don't realize that when they're big enough to reach the sink, they're going to do dishes for the rest of their life. But that's irrelevant. They always had to ask someone for a drink of water. They always couldn't reach this. They couldn't tie their own shoes, and they were getting old enough to do that. So you start to see that we learn to integrate our potential in stories. But that doesn't mean they're true. That was a way for us to access potential, not necessarily a truth. It was a way to put us in the picture. It was a way to say, I'm now old enough to do this. I'm now old enough to drink. I'm now old enough to date. I'm now old enough to vote. Well, for my case, I'm old enough to do nothing. But alas, I'm trying to retire, but it's really difficult. I'm not too sure how to do it.
You're too young to retire. You're only 80. Come on, sloppy chops.
Anyway, it's just like, all my friends say, Chris, you're just going to drop dead someday. And I said, well, yeah, we're all going to drop dead someday. But yeah, I got it. I wouldn't want to lay around, for 12 years in a hospital somewhere. Yeah, I got it. Yeah. Most certainly. So when you start to look at all those things, it's kind of like, where do you go with your stories? So many people would come in the door to see me and to see Dani, and they got a story and they want to know why it's not true. It's like, stop. Your stories are not true. My goodness. One thing that we think we can determine who's lying and who's not. But the truth is, statistically, we don't do a very good job as humans. We really don't. And even when you see a picture, a really good liar can fabricate a picture. So somebody with real Ponzi skill, people really got a lot of skill. So it's amazing. So when you start to look at these 3 skills that I talk about, the ability to translate pictures, and we'll talk about that a little bit, and Dani will too, because she's amazing at this, and energy, and how to feel that and sense that. And just like I said, I get online, and all of a sudden Dani comes in and said, hi, Chris, and my light bulb blows out. And it's like, no, Dani.
Sorry.
I'm going to tell you a secret. I have found, don't quote me, I have found that women are a little better at destroying things than men. Because they have a tendency to spike a lot more energy. And that's kind of interesting. The mitochondrial inside every cell in your body is not your DNA. It's not your mother's DNA. It's the first female. it comes from your mother, but it's not hers, it's not grandma's, it's not great grandma's, it's the first female. We're all connected by a female element. So that power, it is the greatest power, like it or not, right? And so it runs the whole piece of being able to exchange this chunk of dog meat into some type of movement and activity. So it's very powerful, right? So don't ever discount the female, right? Okay. So having said all that, why don't I talk a little bit about pictures, and then I will shut up and let you interact from that, and then we'll kind of go. This is ad lib. We're just kind of making this up as we go along, right?
Of course.
So we've done this for so long, we could fake our way through anything. Come on, I've been married 3 or 4 times. I can't remember their names, so obviously I take.
Okay. Actually, we know it's more than 4 times.
Probably more than 4 times. I can't remember either.
Oh my God.
But I used to have to wear a ring to remember I'm married. Now it's so much pain in my wrist, I can't help forget it. Okay. So when people walk in the door and they sit there and we sit them in front of someone and we say, interact with that person. What I see over and over again, I had a lady that was a writer, and she had written movies, she had written screenplays, she had written books. And so she said, I want to open up my intuition. I want to be a better writer. So I said, sure, come on. So let's sit you in an intuition program. You'll get inspiration from someone else. So sit down in front of them. A few minutes later, she comes walking out kind of all white and shaky. And she goes, I can't do this. I can't do this. And she went out the door. It's like, wow. So bottom line is what happened. She looked at a man who had a really rough childhood, and she had a really rough childhood. And she couldn't distinguish the difference between the two. It's like, so what you do when you look at pictures is you look at someone that, if you're missing an arm and you look at someone who's missing an arm, I used to do this when I worked for the veterans, and we had disabled vets, and I was doing a little therapy with them. I'd take someone with a missing arm, sit in front of another person with a missing arm, and say, okay, you're looking at that guy, tell me what you see. And he'd say, and he'd go like this, and he goes, well, he's got pain all the time, his arm hurts. It says, stop. You got pain all the time. That's not his picture. That's your game. Get out of your picture. I want you to see his picture. What is the value of that? If I can get out of my picture, in psychology, we call that disassociation. I'm no longer controlled by it. Now I have autonomy. So if I look at that guy's picture, I can go, oh my goodness, he's got a missing arm. But he's got a prosthesis and he played softball, and I'm just sitting around watching TV. It's like, oh my God, I can learn from this. Or vice versa, right? You start to see it expands range and horizon for you. It's profound. So this is where all this lady's skill came from. It's like seeing all these possibilities and being able to realize, okay, I've stumbled over all kinds of stuff and I'm learning from this. So that's the first thing. Lessons and techniques. I used to do the blah, blah, blah exercise. I think we mentioned.
Genius. Yeah,
so you sit in front of someone, you go, you tell them what you think of them. I actually hate your guts, you're a dumbass. But you don't say those kind of words. You go blah, 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 blah. And you just go on and on and on. It's really intriguing how when you release all the energy that goes into the experience, you then can get to an integrity in a relationship between the two of you, right? Kind of like an argument. You can get over being mad and come to terms. All of a sudden you feel like you just healed it, right? So come back. Do you have any comments?
Oh my gosh, so much. It's so lovely to see you in teaching mode. It just takes me back 20 years when you had a room full of 100 people all listening to you speak, and then you would make us take action on the information you were giving us to test it for ourselves. And a few things. Number one, mentioning the power of the woman, the mitochondrial energy. You taught us years ago that in the household, generally the feminine energy is stronger, and you would laugh and say, women are 10 times more powerful than you. Why would you even try to take something on 10 times your power? And then noticing, like, when the woman comes home, be she a mother, be she whatever, the energy shifts in the house. And depending on her mood and her frequency, she really does affect the children and everybody else in the house, the animals. And it's really wonderful to empower women in that way who feel like they've got no power, they're nothing, to monitor their own action frequency, their energy that they're putting out. The other thing that you brought to mind in our years together was one of the tests you did years ago is you had us all go around the room and hold something, hold items. This is known as psychometry in some fields.
Right.
And I remember you gave us a ring to hold. And when it was my turn to hold the ring, I just held the ring, just totally open to the ring, seeing what I could feel. And I saw an image of a man laying in a bed with big blue eyes, and he was unwell, and he was wearing white pajamas with a green stripe. And then I'll just go to that one story briefly. When you had us go round and share what we saw, I saw your uncle. That ring had belonged to a beloved uncle of yours. Do you remember
Right.
that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was.
But for people, like, again, people to push on their range, to test their own frequency ability, to be honestly open to an idea, as you would say, entertain the idea of. And so holding a piece of jewelry, psychometry, and just linking in and just not trying, it's not physical effort. You just be with whatever's there, because everything has a frequency. And so that's what you brought to mind. And just in closing, what else you brought to mind? Years ago, a really beautiful friend of mine who is a brilliant Ayurvedic teacher on the planet, before she became who she is in terms of her greatness, she was dating a man who she married. I introduced them. I'm sorry about that. And anyway, he was a great yoga person and wanted to be very well known in his field. And one day he was sick, and she's sitting by his bed, and she is just breathing love into him and light into him. And she called upon or invoked the energy of Shiva, knowing that he's very connected to Shiva, Hindu religion, etc. She brings the energy of Shiva, and he wakes up and he says, "Oh, Shiva was here." Now, I said to her, "Did you tell him that you brought that imagery, that picture in?" She said, "No." He then went on to take that one experience and build on that and became a guru, for example. And this is something else for people to mind. When you, like I that day, were holding your ring, I didn't know what it was. I picked up on the energy of your uncle. Does that make me the greatest psychometrist in the world, the greatest medium, the greatest clairvoyant? No, it was an experience that you validated, which gave me confidence. Then I know I need to grow from this. People seem to take an experience and want to get on YouTube, for example, and be famous at something when they don't have the life experience or the slow you roll down, like figure it out. So that's what you brought to mind with your first dialogue there.
I remember I had a beginning class in Southern California, and there was a group of people that had known each other, and they all came in. There was about 20 of them for a class in someone's living room, so we were all pretty crowded in there. And they were telling me, well, so and so said there's a guy, and they said he's Dutch, and his name was Willem, and so they said, "Oh, whatever you do, don't let Willem in our class, because we'll all quit. We hate that guy." And I go, "Well, okay. So let me think about that." So we were done with the first class, and I'm thinking, Willem, okay. And next thing I know, I got a phone call from Willem, and it's like, "Oh, I hear you're teaching, blah, 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 blah." And he's arrogant and obnoxious, and he knows everything about the world, and he's 60-some years old, and blah, 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 blah. And I'm going, Willem, I think you've got way too much skill for my beginning class. You really do. I'd like to have you come in as a guest into my class. So yeah, you got too much skill to be part of it. So the next week, everybody shows up, and Willem comes into the guest, and everybody's kind of turning their nose down. They're all pissed at me. And it's like, no, Willem came in as a guest. And Willem, sit down and tell me, Willem, if anything in the world, what would you want? What do you really want? You're 60-some years old. What do you really want? And he said, well, what I really want to do is I want to go back to the Netherlands and marry my best friend's wife. I said, okay, Willem, that's a good project. So what's your investment in this? He said, my investment? I'm in love. I said, no. How much money are you willing to pay? He said, well, I don't have a job now and I'm retired. And it's like, Willem, answer my question. How much money you want to pay? He said, well, $40. I said, okay, fine. I said, for $40, this group of people are going to get you married to your best friend's wife. How's that? That's our project. And it's kind of like everybody's looking at me like, what are you, nuts? We hate this guy. We don't want to do this. It's totally unethical. And I'm going, yeah. So I said, Willem, come back in a month. Give us a little time to get it because we're just all beginners here, right? And so he left. We did the wedding. We made it all happen. Him and her were so lovey-dovey. It was like 16-year-olds. They were all kissy-faced, lovey-dovey. It was just amazing.
What do you mean? I don't get it. I don't understand. What do you mean? You send Willem away.
I took the whole group as a theme, and that's what we worked on every day at the end of class. We work on that for 10 minutes, making Willem and his girlfriend come together in a relationship.
You mean
what happened in that?
Imagined it? They had the whole group imagining that this was going to happen?
We just imagine. It's just pictures. That's what we're working on pictures. We just imagine it, right? So we just pictured them getting married. Oh my goodness. So what happened is her husband, now she's got grown kids that are 25, 30 years old, right? These people are 60 years old, right? So her husband leaves her. He's an intellectual. He's just like a professor at a college. He doesn't ever socialize very much. He's not like, oh, hi, I love you, dear. None of that kind of crap. It's all, So they separate. She's a nurse. She's a world healer, blah, blah, blah. She comes to the United States and we do the wedding. And we marry the two of them.
In real life.
Yes, in real life. And my knowledge, they're still together. It's just kind of like, for $40, come on, give me a break. That's the power.
Man, you're going to get a lot of emails, Chris.
I get a lot of nasty email from this. So yes, it's very questionable in an ethical standpoint, absolutely without a doubt. Not something I would do, but it was a teachable moment, right? And so I wanted them, number one, to realize that this guy was a jerk, but you don't have to hate him. That's a big thing. And, one of my philosophical statements I had to dig around is, if I state that I don't agree with you, that does not indicate that I believe you are wrong. If Dani and I are healthy people, we eat good food. If we went to lunch, we'd probably order something different. Does that mean I think she's wrong or I'm wrong? Come on. We have a different philosophy in life. That doesn't mean anything. Doesn't mean one of us is wrong. We all did the same thing. I would have more hair. No, it doesn't quite work that way, you guys. The difference makes wholeness. Every one of us unique to make a whole package. The human race really is all the product of the first female. It's all the product of a package. It takes all of us together. We should never, never, never agree. But we don't have to fight over it. We don't have to make somebody wrong. We have to respect someone else doing what they're doing. That's, I think, the keynote. And that's what you learn, I think, from pictures, right? You realize their experience with a fire maybe is different than yours, right? Without a doubt. It's like, oh my goodness. So Willem's experience of love was totally different than a group of middle-aged Americans sitting in someone's living room. Like, that's kind of disgusting. He wants to run off with his friend's girlfriend, but it's like a wife of 25 years or whatever, but it all kind of worked out. I had no idea other than the fact of this was a teachable moment. This was like an opportunity to see if we can make it happen, right? Where else do you get a sense of getting a neutral to someone's picture and being able to help them, right? How can you help someone if you judge them? Then you can't help them, right?
Yeah.
I don't know how many people have called me up and say, I'm a friend of Bob's and I'd like to take your classes. And I had people say, I just hung up on him. I just hung up. And they'd call me back and it might take them a month till they finally get me to talk to them. And they said, why'd you hang up on me? And I said, you said you're a friend of Bob's. Bob's an imbecile. So why should I talk to you? And they said, well, I like Bob. Oh, okay. Well, tell me what's good about Bob. Say, now we're opening a conversation. That means they see Bob and I learn and they learn. We can, but in playing cards, I know, Bob, you think I'm going to accept you. I'm sorry, that's not going to happen, right? Not at all, right? So you need to show up. You need to be a real person. You need to be interactive, or why should I talk to you? Right? That's it. That's just that simple.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's my criterion or my philosophy in the beginning. Come on, I had a couple hundred people coming and going. It's just like in the course of a month, we'd have 200 people in and out the doors. We had 120 people come for lectures. Is it a big success? No, I wouldn't want an evangelist with 10,000 people, for heaven's sakes. That'd be a nightmare. But it was a success because we impacted a group in society that was significant. That was all we were trying to do. Like, can we make this a better place? Maybe one little bite at a time, right? That's it, right? So I'm old, but I'm a dreamer still, right? Okay.
So just a couple of caveats there, ladies and jelly beans. We are not suggesting that you can pay Chris $40 and he'll get a group of people together to make your wildest dreams come true. It obviously happened synchronicity-wise that there was an unhappy marriage happening and there was a lot of projection happening, not so much metaphysical manipulation or spelling or dark magic, but a set of situations that dovetail together to allow energy to move. Also, with regards to people that lie and are dishonest on purpose. Well, the thing about when you believe a lie, you believe it. Some people are willing to die for that lie, and they're the greatest salespeople in the world because they believe it. They believe everything they're saying, and you're not going to convince them otherwise, probably, unless they have their own one-to-one experience or they allow themselves to consider, am I wrong? Am I wrong? Which I think we should all do, no matter who we are, no matter what we have. But pictures, that technique you shared earlier, one of my favorite, I've used it in my clinic for so many years and given it for free on my channel many times, the blah, blah, blah. So you as a person have something so painful you're holding on to. It's dreadful, it's awful, it's just blocking your life. And yet you pick someone, you sit in front of them, and you were going to tell them the worst of the worst that's happened to you because you have to have some kind of a release, an energetic release. So you look at them and they are prepared for this and you use the word blah. So let's say I went for a walk in the jungle and a man jumped me and attacked me. And we're going to go is blah, 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 blah. And so what you're doing is releasing the frequency, the pain that you're holding on to, of that, and it is such a healing. Like you can sit with your lover and you can be really angry with them, but you don't want to cause a big argument, but you have to have a release. You can say, I need to tell you how I feel by using the word blah. I invite you to do the same. Response, balance. And that has worked so often. And one of the times that this just blew my mind, the blah, blah, blah technique was, I was talking to a woman. She said, oh my God, I met this girl and her father used to make her and her little brother do terrible things with each other that children should never do. And the father would watch, and it was just so disgusting and evil. And it really stayed with me. This was a class that we had at your center in Solana Beach, California. And I went home feeling upset and sorry for these children. That's, I've done a lot of work with kids over the years and it bothered me. The next day you were doing one of your weekend seminars where we do all kinds of, one of them was we sat blindfold and we had to eat our lunch with somebody telling us where we to put the fork, and it was a trust experiment. And so I get this beautiful girl turns up, this enormous girl wearing the largest dress I've ever seen. She was absolutely huge and beautiful in every way. She was new, and I went up to her straight away and said, oh, come and sit with me, because she was really nervous. And then it was the blah exercise. So I sat with her in front of her, and it was her turn to say blah to me. She starts blaring, and I can see her pictures. I can see, and it's her. It was her. It was like it was a serendipitous divine orchestration. The girl whose father had made her and her brother do dreadful sexual things to each other was sitting in front of me. And I remember just holding space, feeling deep compassion for her, but learning, as you had taught us, do not take that on. You have to learn separation, compassion, yes, but separation. So these techniques are so powerful, aren't they? Especially when you are able to see someone's picture from a vibratory resonance. It just comes out of them vocally.
Right. Yes. So if you can't make a disassociation, then you become. And you don't want to become someone else's issue or someone else's problem or someone else's sickness. And for all you people out there that do healings and energy healings and so on and so forth, and you're moving your hands around and working with your field, I used to have people that were healers and they get caught up in the drama of somebody's sickness. So instead of sitting down and having them tell a story, I would have somebody sit down and I'd have the patient sit down and I'd say, okay, I want you to act out a drama. I don't care if it's smiling and happy or if it's silly or anger, get mad, whatever, just really act it out. No words, just act it out. I want you to just get all wired up. I want you to start to sweat. I want you to get so fired up. So they get all fired up. I said, okay, now pause. Now do a healing on them. And they'd feel that energy. And it was kind of amazing. They were really warm, but all the energy was flowing away from them. When you get all this energy emotes, it produces movement. And if you can that's why I don't get upset when I've had people in class throw things at people and everything else, and they just sit back and laugh and said, okay, come on, you guys, get a grip. You're going to have to sit in a corner and do blahs, so you can get through this. It's okay to get mad at someone, but you don't have to act out. You just simply realize, okay, they lit me up. It's okay. That's just what happened, right? So we get upset, we do whatever we want to do. That's just a game, right?
I like your phrase.
Right?
It is, like you say, when we get lit up, when we have response to stimuli, whether it's outside or inside of us, there's something there to take care of. We can project that, or we can look at it and sit down and go, I've got something to do. I have something to work on.
Yeah. Right. Yes, it does. It puts it into context. So anyway, those are just the ability to disassociate. We call that in psychology. It's the ability to see and experience or hear someone's story and not get suckered into it, but to recognize you can be compassionate and you might actually be able to help people. And I found the more that you can be able to be disassociated, the more that you can be beneficial for helping people. And it's absolutely it's absolutely profoundly different. I had a lady in Denver called me last year, and she doubled over in pain, and she was in a hospital. And her husband was an old student of mine, and he said, Chris, can you help? My wife's in pain. She's doubled over, and they think it's her spleen, and they're going to do surgery, and they're going to do this, that, and the other. And I go, okay, she's going to need some help, but I'll get her out of the hospital. So the next morning, they release her. She comes home, not a problem. So it does mean that she has to address her issues. She has issues, but nonetheless, she is starting to address the issues. And over the next couple of years, she will start to separate from that. I had a guy call me one time from a hospital. I was in a religious science church. So I was teaching a class and the phone rang. And so somebody answered it. And they handed the phone to me and they said, I think this is for you. And I'm thinking, for me? How can it be for me? I'm just rented a space in here to teach a class. So I get the phone and the guy said, I was just at a fire walk. I have done dozens of fire walks. I was just at a fire walk and now I'm in a hospital and they're talking about removing my feet.
Oh my
because God. The burns were so bad. And they're going to do it first thing at 8:00 tomorrow morning. And I said, so tell me, what did you do you shouldn't do? Well, we had a tailgate party before the firewalk. So you're telling me that you were eating crappy food and drinking booze before doing a firewalk? He said, well, it was just fun. I said, okay, it was fun, but it wasn't very smart. So now you're dealing with consequences and you want me to fix it, right? He said, well, can you help? I said, okay, tomorrow morning, give me a number, I will call. If you're still there tomorrow morning, I'll talk to you. If not, you're on your own, right? So no problem. I called the next morning. They had released him that night. He walked away.
Amazing.
So it's like, all I had to do was indicate, because we make a mistake doesn't mean we're deemed to death, for heaven's sakes. Just like we're human, we make mistakes. it was a stupid thing to do. You're going to put out energy to do something. Come on, that's thousands of degrees. It's like insane. You walk on those like nuts, really totally nuts. I did an advance walk one time, and we got 5 fires. Advance walk means we're always throwing coals from another fire to keep it hot for a longer period of time. More walking. They're all people with experience. I'm standing there, and we're all kind of like waiting for the coals to get gone. And this little girl in diapers grabs my hand and walks me out on the center of the fire. She's a toddler. She's just a little kid. And she sits her butt down, diapers on, and she sits her butt down in the coals. And I got a pair of cutoffs on, and I'm sitting there going, I've done a lot of fire walks, so I've got no shoes on. I realize your legs get dirty. And so I've got cutoffs on because I know my pants are getting dirty. So I sit down on my butt across from her. She scoops up a hand full of debris from the fire, blows on it, catches flames, it's burning in her hand. And so I catch up some, blow on it, and it's burning on her hand, my hands. And she smiles and she goes, okay. And she gets up and she brushes her hands off, gets me up, and we walk out of the coals. It's like, wow, where do you put that in context? Well, that doesn't fit anywhere in our world. I'm sorry, it just doesn't.
It's
right?
so metaphysically pretty much unexplainable to many on many levels. I want you to, I'm going to remind you of a story that I know is going to help people. Oh, by the way, those of you that heard that Chris rented a space in a Scientology type religious science room, chill out. Don't allow yourself to get triggered. He's not a Scientologist. He's Chris Lemmon, Dr. Chris Lemmon. Meaning you've studied psychology, philosophy, and we can't even go into the amount of careers you've had, or the fact that actually your full title, not that you care, is the very right Reverend, because you're at bishop level in terms of a certain structure, but it's non-religious. Years ago, you saved another life when and a lot of people now are going into their spiritual release. This is, I really believe we are ascending, we are evolving. This is a step in humanity, and you're most skilled at human potential. So we're told different things about what Kundalini energy is, or the caduceus in the first chakra coming up to the pineal gland, or whatever you want to call it, third eye. There's a lot of people saying, don't do it, you'll explode, you won't know what you're doing, la la la. Now, years ago, you told us a story about a man who had a Kundalini experience, and he ended up in emergency, and you recommended the blue ice image. And that's all I'm going to say, because I don't know whether you've remembered this story from many years ago, but please, can you tell it to people to give them a tool if they go on an internal spiritual journey and they get overheated or something? Right.
So the guy had a disease to start out with, and he had the shakes, so he had like Parkinson's disease, and he had signed up, his sister had signed him up for classes thinking it might help him. We actually took him to a firewalk, and we walked him through the coals. That was kind of amazing. The guy actually lived to be they thought he'd be dead by 25 or 30, and he lived to be like 60 years old before he finally died. But for the most part, he had taken a class, and we had talked a little bit about Kundalini. And I told him, I said, really pay attention here, because I think when you get that disease goes in, it's almost like there's too much energy going through your circuit. And that's why you're all shaky and everything. So see what you can do here. So I taught a technique that you could take blue ice, like whatever that is, and you just pack it on top of you to cool your body down, right? And so here he is, he's going into a seizure, he's flopping around on the floor, and God knows what, all right. And so he manages to hit his phone. His sister comes running over. Oh, she calls an ambulance. They got him in the hospital. And she calls me on the phone, and she says, oh, save him. So she hands the phone to him, and I get him on the phone, and I said, how are you doing? He said, I'm fine now. I forgot the blue ice. As soon as I remembered the blue ice, I'm like, I just turned this off. It's like, I just turned this off. It's like, I'm fine. I'm just fine. And so I said, okay. So he actually was moved out of facility, rented his own apartment, and for quite a few years lived on his own, got a job, and was quite functional all the way across. Now, That's not in denial of biology. He still had lots of issues. But nonetheless, what we're doing here with quality of life, just like you said, if you have a model of something, once again, there's nothing wrong with a model, right? We all do things differently, without a doubt. I have done a multitude of different things. I do stained glass. I did karate classes. I did ballroom dancing. I've done a lot of stuff in life, and I know you've done a lot of stuff in life too. And so when you look at all those, people come back and said, are you ever going to go back to doing ballroom dancing? You dance competition for, I said, that was magical because the girl I danced with had a dance studio, so she was good, and she was Miss California. So it's kind of like, how could I go wrong? So
win-win.
Yeah, it's a win-win. It's like all I had to do was show up with her. We just like won. So it was not a problem. What I'm saying is we have to take a look at setups and find your autonomy in the way we set up life, right? The way we experience things, right? It's kind of like being at the right place at the right time, they talk about. I'm saying it's not luck. It's you being able to pay attention and being at the right place at the right time. That's what it comes from. Being able to be attentive, to be able to be there. So people walk in the front door, right place, right time, they learn something. Other people come in the door and they get mad and they walk out. It's like, whatever, right? It's like, that's just the way it is. So I don't think it's my job or your job to be able to save the world. I think that you see a stream of potential, great, go with it. My goodness gracious. If you want to play the flute, learn to play the flute. I don't care. It's a stream of potential. I do something different. I don't see a problem with that either. I don't want everybody on my bus. And you don't want everybody on your bus. It gets too crowded. Everybody has to have a way to map their way through this. I don't think there's a right or wrong. I think that potential just means that. It's all potential. There's not one size, one way. That's it. Let's all try something and see what happens. I don't like to turn down any crazy ideas. It's just no matter what. That's why I've traveled the world. I've been to Morocco, I've been to Thailand, been to China, I've been all through South America. I've been everywhere and spent a lot of time with indigenous people, with tribal people. And in the United States every year, we spend weeks and weeks with the Indian reservations. And so I actually go there and do counseling. I go to their headquarters and I say, hey, I'm in town for 2 weeks. I'm in a hotel. Just tell them to call the hotel and make appointments with me. I don't have a phone because I don't carry one. So they call the hotel and make appointments with me. They'll have my schedule at the desk. And I sit there and for 8 hours a day, I counsel people that are having problems with their life. They're just real people, right? But they don't have a whole lot of money. So I'm cheap. I'm free. That's pretty much cheap. Right? So I'm sitting there because why not, right? I mean, I have some knowledge. I have some skill sets. Let's come on in. I meet some of the greatest people in the world. And it's just really profound. I had a guy come in, he was telling me, his wife was going down and she'd be gone for 2 months now because her mother was sick and blah, 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 and his whole life, and he'd been sick and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. We had 1 hour counseling session. And later on that evening, I got a phone call. Deborah and I were having dinner, and I got a phone call, and he said, oh my God. He said, I walked into he's in a patch dogs. All the dogs came over and they're all jumping on me. So I put the food down for them and they didn't eat the food. They're all climbing all over me. The dogs, this is the first time in 2 months the dogs are paying attention to me. And then I'm sitting there and the dogs are climbing over and the phone rings. I pick it up. It's my wife saying, my mother's not getting better. I'm giving up. I'm coming home. I miss you. It's like my whole life has just turned around overnight here. Not because I did magic, but because I could get him to see that it could change. He had to entertain it to see that as a potential. That was not my potential. That was his, not your potential, his. So we bring something to someone as a gateway, as an opening, and we march into it. And that's what we do. It's like we just carry the light for it. That makes sense.
Yeah, and it's so great to have someone to sit in front of. I remember some of the last trainings I did with you. I was in California with my then beloved Jeff, who passed away, and we did a weekend course with you, which was so rare because you were actually in California at the same time as me, and you haven't done, you know, full-time teaching for some time. And we did a technique. It was called entrainment. We were in training, matching energy frequency with the person, but people can also do this in the mirror. There's so much healing to be done in the mirror. And some of the things you're saying are, when we have an idea, pictures, imagery of what we potentially could, we're actually starting to create that. We're actually creating a stream of potential, as you call it, to create that, manifest that. With the guy with the blue eyes, just want to make the point for people that didn't quite get that, is that you taught that man to imagine freezing cold ice on the top of his head, blue ice being the coldest. And he went there. And so his body didn't know whether the ice was there or not, but it believed that it was because he put his focus there, and it took down all of his energetic, you know, pop-offs.
Right. Yes. And it becomes a functional solution. Our imagination gets us into trouble. Our imagination can get us out of trouble. Right. And so we just need to have a relationship with that, because imagination is nothing else but creativity or potential, right? That's it. So it's an eternal element. Yes, we live in a structured world, so we can come up with an idea like winning lottery number, but somehow we got to get the number on a ticket, right? I remember Jose Silva, when I met him eons ago, he had got his start because he had a dream seeing a number. He didn't know what it was, but he remembered the number. And then he's walking into a liquor store or something on his way home from work, and he sees a lottery ticket up there. And that number was on a ticket. And he goes, "What is that?" And the guy said, "Well, it's a lottery." And he said, "Well, how much are they?" And he says, $1 or whatever. And he says, "Well, can I buy that ticket?" And he said, "Yeah." So with that ticket, he got enough money to leave Mexico. He couldn't speak English, come to Texas, because he had a relative that was in a university in Texas, and a professor in psychology said, "Jose, you tell us your stories about working with dreams to heal, and we'll teach you English and translate." And so he opened a center for children. And so Jose Silva's techniques was something that someone bartered off of him, in other words, used his name for a fee, so Jose could invest in a facility for children. He had a little girl that was frightened, pictures we talk about, and she was afraid of the boogeyman. She'd see the boogeyman crawl under the table, preschooler. He taught her to make them smaller. This is what he taught her. When you see a boogeyman, make them smaller. You've heard this before, right? Make them smaller. So pretty soon you see the little girl in the window playing with something in her hand. And he said, "What is that?" She said, "It's the boogeyman. I made him really small." You see, that's just playing with imagination got this child who was in a facility to be somewhat functional and normal again, right? And that's what's profound. It's the whole nature of it, right? And so it's a disassociation of a picture or whatever, right? Okay. So we talk a little bit about energy, and then we'll see what comes up on that. So there's lots of ways to function in life. And I always, in beginning classes, I teach people to start to pay attention to the energy flow in your life, in your body. It's just like if you're going to be an athlete, or like I was, a dancer, then you have to recognize that you have to have certain movements with your body, right? Sensations, whatever you're doing, to be able to incorporate into the activity that you're doing, right? So literally, if you're using your energy to create something, which is what it's there for, you need to start to pay attention to the flow of the energy and find out where it's gone. So we make up a little thing about getting grounded and feeling this and the other. That gets us our attention. We're just saying we need to pay attention. I'm not all that sure that the story is scientific, but if I pay attention, I have an experience of like what's going on in my body. So what I get by the time that first 6-week class is over, instead of people coming in saying, "Oh, I got a toothache last week," or "I got a headache," they come in and said, "Oh my goodness, I was walking down the street, I had a headache. I looked over and I saw someone rubbing their headache, and I realized, oh, I'm matching them." So I shook my head, and it's like, that's them. They started to understand that their energy and someone else's energy wasn't the same. you start to identify your energy. When you start to identify your energy flow, then when something's sore and not working, you can then sit there and say, wow, let me work on that flow of energy. It's just phenomenal. Can we get this circulating? Can we get grounded? Can we get this flowing? Can we get this to move a little bit? And that's what I do in the very beginning. In the very beginning classes, I said, can you get attention to your energy, right? This is all about you. Get your attention in here and what it's doing. If you pay attention to this, then you don't get caught up in some other silliness out there. Pay attention to this. If it's not supported by this energy, walk away. That's it, right? Just like don't fall into it. Somebody invites me to something, I'm sitting there and all of a sudden I feel resistance, I get warm and I'm going, I don't think I really want to go. So I just call up and say, I got a headache, I'm not going, or whatever story I want to use. Bottom line is just like, because I realize it's just not a flow, it's not going to work. And it's just very profound. I can remember eons back in college, I was taking a class in dramatic writing. I was taking a class in poetry, and the teacher wanted volunteers who wanted to go read their poems in a coffee shop. I thought, well, that's like weird, right? I'll do that. So I went out there and I read my poems in a coffee shop, and the people were appalling me. So the next time I did it, I took a guitar and I would just take a couple of notes on the guitar and I would read my poem. And it's like, oh my goodness, next thing I know, this guy wants to book me in there to do performances on Saturday nights. And I'm thinking, no, wait a minute. I didn't even want to write a poem. Let's just do poetry. But it's fun how when you embrace a potential and feel that flow, that it carries you, that it inspires you, that it drives you. And yeah, that's it. I've gone down a million paths, and it's just like it inspires me. And then when it hits us at some point, I say, okay, I'm done with that. Next, right? Next. Yeah. It moves on. Just, that's it.
With the headache thing, again, you taught me this years ago. I don't take pills. I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't take pills. I didn't even think about taking a headache pill, because what I learned from you was this: if there is a disturbance or a headache, it is energy trying to get your attention. So what I always do is I report into my messenger center in my brain. I imagine that headache coming here in the center of my head, and I make it one black spot. And then I take my hand and I literally grab it and I throw it. And I am redirecting whatever interruption is in my physical biome to one singular point where I'm going to take charge, right? And I do that automatically. Secondly, years ago, when I knew you back in the day when I was training with you, I had a severe attack of meningitis. I was finishing a TV series I was writing. It's called The Agency, about all my paranormal experiences, my alien experiences, etc. And in the morning when I woke up, I felt like I was wearing a heavy 4,000-pound suit of armor. I couldn't even move my neck. Anyway, ambulance came, diagnosed meningitis. Went to the doctor, the doctor, everyone, meningitis, nobody knew, is it viral, bacterial? It was a big drama. And while everyone is freaking out around me, I am saying to my body, you can shut up. We are not doing this. I am not doing this. They are not doing a lumbar punch on me. I will not allow this. I sent everybody out the room. I laid down. I went inside. I imagined everything calming down, calming down, calming down. A doctor comes, does a test on me. He says, I don't know why everyone is peeing their pants around you, lady. You do not have meningitis. You have inflammation of the lower menses. I had taken it all the way down. So I proved to myself, it doesn't work for everyone. It doesn't work. I had a lady once, Wendy. She had breast cancer. She was terrified. She was due to go in on Monday, let's say, to have a final scan before surgery. She knew, what I do, having learned so much from you and other people over the years, plus my own kind of innate, whatever it is I possess. And I sat with her and I got her to imagine that she was on, let me go back a bit. I got her to imagine a dial in front of her. And I got her to imagine turning the dial all the way down and communicating to her body that she was turning down the cancer cells. So she went into herself. We did some breathing to get into a very calm state. And then when she came out of it, she went, I imagined that I was on a boat and I was literally turning the wheel of the boat, the steering wheel of the boat. And that was her dial. And I swear, as the gods are my witness, on Monday morning, the tumor had gone. She did that. And she's still there in Walton-on-Thames running her beautiful store to this day. This is like 15 years ago.
Right.
When people realize their potential. It's not just about a pill or having to do this or that. Not that we're advocating anyone gives up meds. We're not. Don't do that. You did not hear that here. But just to allow them with our life experience, you and I, how unbelievably powerful we are. Oh my God.
Yeah. It's interesting. And sometimes when we see those things, miracles sometimes work, sometimes they don't. I had a lady that came to me and she wanted to become a minister. And she was a naturopath. And so I'm going, oh, okay, whatever. So she started taking classes and she had some ailment. I didn't ask what. And pretty soon she wasn't showing up for class. So I called her to see if everything was okay. And she said, I didn't tell you, but I have cancer and I'm dying. And I'm a naturopath. So I haven't put it out to the public yet because it's like, it's discredited the fact that I'm a doctor and I shouldn't be dying from this. I feel stupid, right?
Oh.
I said, no, don't feel stupid. I said, if we start to look at this, we could change your relationship with it, or we could find the value in it. Those are the two elements. So literally, she didn't make it to class, but the night that she became a minister, we had her on speakerphone. And she went through the whole protocol and she became a minister. And the next morning she died. And so it was very interesting. When the class was over, her husband came to me and he said, I have been a drunk. I have been a derelict. I have been mean. I have been abusive. I have been everything. And that lady has stuck by me for 20 years. And he said, I just cried for 3 weeks after she died. Literally couldn't get out of the house. And this is as strong as I could get to come see you to tell you how much I thank you for allowing her to heal me. If it wouldn't have been for her death, I would have never got it. I would have continued to be a jerk. It's like, what does it take? It's just like, oh my goodness. That's the first time I saw that story unfold. He came back 2 years later and actually signed up and volunteered to help out in some organizations in somewhere in Mexico, South America. And he was going to go down there for a year to help out. It was kind of like all of a sudden he had given up being a drunk. He'd given up being abusive. He'd given up beating on people. He just changed his whole life. And it was amazing. And so because she had loved him, it was kind of like, that's what she wanted. She was a healer. And it was like, what does it take to heal my husband? And who am I to judge any of that, right? I have no idea, but it worked. And when he sat there telling me his story, I was just in tears. It was kind of like, wow, this is kind of amazing. It really was. We had 200 people come for her service when she passed.
Oh.
We had to do a quest table. We had to find a place big enough to house that many people. My center would only hold 100. So it was like, yeah. So it was huge. It was really huge. She had a lot of people that loved her. And a lot of those people came in and took classes after she had passed and understood a process she was going through that you would never know on the surface. You never see it on the surface, right? But most certainly it was there. So it's intricate the way this whole thing weaves. I don't know if we can logically figure it all out, right? It's just like you just see something and you just kind of like, it's how I'm going to do it. And that's your pathway and that's where you go, right? And so, and it's what I say, she felt the energy flow and she really realized that the title of minister, for whatever reason in her head, getting the title of minister means that all of a sudden she could pull this off. I have no idea what that meant. I have no clue, right? But she did it. She really did it. She changed this guy who was total jerk. I mean, impatient. There's one day where she was in class and I took her home because he got tired of waiting for her and he left her. And I gave her a ride home. It was just not nice. But most certainly he changed in the next 2 years after she passed. Profound.
it's a very sad fact, in my opinion, that there are people who will manifest an illness to get out of a trapped and entrapment. And we see it and have always seen it. It's everywhere.
Right. Yes, it is. And so, it's not a question they did right, wrong. That's most certainly not the question. It's just kind of like sometimes you don't see another alternative, right? And it's just like, wow. And that's what I had to do back with Willem in the beginning. That first story I told, I had to really look at that and said, really, do I want to engage for $40 in this guy's idiot view? I thought, well, I can't judge him. So I'm going to have to go down this road and see where it goes. It all worked out really good. And her ex-husband sent me some books, Kabbalistic books and stuff that he had found and had double copies of. And I had never met him. And he sent them to me. And it's like, what was that connection from? I have no clue. So I don't think he harbored anything with, I think he was probably glad to be out of the relationship, because that was kind of like the mystical side of things. He was, he was into all those organizations in the Dutch, blah, 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 mystical organizations. And that was all kind of good. That's what he did. And Masons, all that stuff. He was all those levels and had all those badges and awards and everything. And he said, here's some duplicate books. I understand you study this stuff here. And he sent me 3 of them. It's like, wow, that was really interesting. So I don't know. It's really fun seeing all this come unfolding, right?
Yeah.
So that's a little bit about the movement of energy. And it's like you see the flow of energy, you got to kind of like, it's not logical. It's just a potential. Potentials aren't logical, right? So that's what we have to flow with. We just imagine in a certain way.
Yeah, potentials aren't logical. We just imagine them a certain way for us, the individual.
Yes, for you, you got it. So whatever you work and you got a group of people, it's like, yes, that's it, right? Who all was on Noah's Ark, right? It's like, whatever, there you go. Like, that's it, right? So whatever that piece is, you jump into and you just kind of flow with it, right? And the more you engage with it, the more certainty you have about it, the more confident you have about it. And it's like, that's exactly where it flows. Okay. So the third thing I had on my list for stories, I think kids start telling stories. I think I mentioned that once they get to a certain age, they can't wait till they get bigger. They can't wait till they do this. They can't do that. So we start to associate potential things we imagine with our stories. So we think there's a truth in our stories. But really the job of stories is just to put you in it. Your eyes are in your head. You don't see you in it. So this is kind of nice. I can see you there, but I'm not sure you're real. But I can look out my window and see the squirrels running on my fence too. So doing both at the same time, right? It's kind of fun. But normally in life, you don't get to see you. So we start building stories saying, I was there, I saw that. So we build stories and we build stories and we build stories. And what gets people into trouble is they start to make the stories a truth and they argue for the truth of a story. It's like your story and your truth might be totally different than me. It doesn't make you wrong. So when we start to look at that, we have to start to look at a story as being tied to a potential. It might tell you something, but it doesn't mean that it's a truth, right? Yeah. And so it ties to potential. You got 10 people that want to go hang out together. Great. Now you got a story that works. But you got 10 people that say they want to hang out together and they don't show up. You have a story that don't work, right? And so that's like invite people to stuff and they don't show up. It's kind of like, nah, they don't really want to come anyhow, right? That's it. So you have to take a look, and the story by itself is not what makes it all work. The story just has an element. And I see so many people, they come to me and they say, why did they lie to me? Why did they do this? Why did they do that? I said, because you believe their story. You believe their story is a truth. You and I look at the picture and we'd see it and we'd go, they're just bullshitting, right? It ain't going to happen. But other people hear it and go, well, that's what they said. Yes, you just recognize that it was their integration into the package of structure. Doesn't mean they're going to do it, right? Doesn't at all mean it did. And we know today that if it's a question of life or death, if a doctor said, if you don't quit drinking or smoking, you've only got a small chance of living, because your liver's shot. And what we find is that 3% of the people respond by change. 3%. So how powerful is the story? Somewhere around 97%. We buy into our stories. We think of them as true, right? If we see them as a potential, they'll be flowing. There's energy flowing. We can feel that. If we think it's a story, then it's us working our butt off trying to make it happen. That's the difference. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Let me go back a step, because something earlier, like much earlier, when you were saying about when people we'd have someone sit down and then we would feel their energy.
Right.
Kind of skip past that as we're trying to give people tools to play with their friends, their
Right.
whatever who's around them, and learn and figure out this metaphysical piece within themselves.
Right.
How can we show them how to feel energy around something or someone physically?
Well, I think some of the best things is to get them to rub their hands to start out with, so it gets to be a little sensitive. And I can take this mic, which is over here, and I can feel the energy on that mic, which is coming off as a push, because it's an energy piece. So then when you put your hand around the person, you don't want to get too close, come out a little ways and kind of come in and find out where the edge is. And you'll start to feel that. It's very, very subtle. It's almost not quite real, but then you play with it for a little while, and next thing you know, it's more real and more real. If you got dogs and cats, you can start to feel with their energy. I get people, their dog goes all angsty and it's all jumping around because there's strangers in the house. And I'll go over and I'll put my hand on the dog's chest. And I'll just have my hand on the dog's chest. And then I'll just pull my hand back and then just push a little bit on that energy. And all of a sudden, the dog feels like all of a sudden it's been comforted, right? And so the dog calms down and it just follows me around. Now, we just became friends, right? Because you've got to remember, this machine is all defensive, right? It's all defensive. So all animals are defensive. So they're looking to make sure they're going to be safe. And that's what we're doing, right? So our big story is like, how do we defend ourselves? What's threatening us? So it's always like there's a war going on, but doesn't have to be that way, right? Just because the mechanism is trying to defend you, it's an immune response, doesn't mean that we have to go to war with it. It just means that we start to acknowledge the energy is trying to keep me safe, right? So respect that, let it do what it's doing, and then interact where it's safe. That's it. That's what you play with. So when you start to feel with that, you start to feel the energy, and you start to recognize that, and then you start to feel things. You know, it's so simple. I have taken a group of people somewhere in the Midwest, and I sent them a bunch of classes, 6 sheets of paper of how to do a healing class. And next thing I know, why I'm getting all these reports back from these people. Oh my God, that was so simple. Oh my goodness gracious, that's just kind of amazing. Oh, I got rid of this rash I had all over my arm. I've had it there for a year. It's like, it is really interesting to see what happens. Yeah, you get to switch sides. One girl said she gave her boyfriend a healing, and then he asked out some other girl. And she said, at first she was kind of mad. Then she talked to him. He said, you know, I'd seen this other girl and I was attracted to her. And so I was always shy and I didn't want to ask her out. I know this is a horrible thing to admit to, but that was the truth. And I asked her out, and then I went out with her, and actually she was horrible. She was a bitch. I didn't like her at all. And he says, so I'm back here talking to you because I want to apologize for what I did. It was like, it's interesting. She healed him, but he found his own truth. He found a difference between what his fantasy was and what he really liked in a person, right? And a quality in life that he couldn't see, right? So it was like, wow. So those are the lessons that we learn in healing. It's not always easy to put into a context, right? It's not always like you make warts go away. Yeah. And I know my daughter used to always come to me when she was like 12, 13, 14 and say, Dad, I got a wart. Would you make this thing go away? I don't want a wart on my hand. And so the next morning it'd be gone. And she'd go, how do you do that? And I said, you don't want to know how I did it. And so she said, why do you say that? Because what you want is you want me to do it. Think about it. When you're ready to do it, then you come and say, now teach me. And she goes, oh, so it was quite a few years later when she had a daughter that was having problems and then with drug problems. And she said, Dad, you need to teach me. So she was then able to work with that girl and get her cleaned up and get her back on track. But that's the whole nature of it. It's not like something you just throw out there. It's like the people got to be ready. They got to be able to entertain it, and they can have that experience. It's amazing, right? When you rub your hands and you start to feel the difference, then you start to get more sensitive to energy change. I run around all winter in a t-shirt, and people come visit me and they go, it's 40 degrees outside and you're in a t-shirt. It's 30 degrees outside and you're in a t-shirt. And I said, yeah, I learned that when I was 5 years old. Because it's cold outside, it doesn't mean I have to be cold. But I get to manage my relationship with the ambient within reason. If it's 20 below, I'm going to find a coat, right? But somewhere in between there, most certainly, not totally crazy, somewhere in between there, I can start to manage that. And so this is what the whole thing is. It's like we need to manage our life a little better so we can interact a little better. And this is what you've been doing for eons now. It's like teaching people to interact a little better, come together in a community, right? And make things a solid agreement to where you can launch forward. Who can you rely on? Who can you trust? Who can you share a vision with, right? That's the whole idea, right? It's like, that's what we're doing. We need to not have clubs that go to war. We need to find clubs that'll get together to create peace, to create tranquility, right? Mm-hmm. And so, and that's exactly what we're doing. And I think that's the whole idea. So in the very beginning, you need to get people to feel something, experience it. I've had people that the first night couldn't feel it, and they go, oh, I couldn't feel anything. And the next night they come in to class and it's like, oh my God, I could feel that. Oh my goodness, what was that? You know, and then you have to explain to them what that is, and they look at you like you're totally crazy, right? But you know, next thing you know, you got people taking things out, sticking things in, pulling things out.
Yeah, I used to love those classes. So you would have us, you'd have one person sit in a chair, and then we would rub our hands together to create our own electromagnetic static, and then put our hands very slowly apart to feel that frequency. We could either use it for self-healing, or we could then like put our hands in front of the person and feel their energy, like you say, the edge of their energy. And then we could go into, maybe close our eyes and then get into feeling what we felt there. And then, you know, using our imagination to bring the information, maybe we feel a block and we have their permission to move that block out of the way or whatever it is. We're just moving energy around because we are energy frequency. And so many people had so many wonderful experiences, but then, you know, cut to, in this day and age, there's such a, people want this shortcut. They're programmed with the celebrity button, like, oh, you want to be a famous healer? Do one class. Oh my God, you were amazing. And off they go. And they're missing their own inner journey. And then they're out there projecting. And then people may not be getting the best information, but also that person has robbed themselves of their own human potential, you know, to heal themselves, their childhood, their pain, their agony, their walking past somebody with a matching story to them, not knowing and getting triggered and then attacking. You know, it's just incredible what we see.
Yes. Yes, it's really very interesting. And it's very interesting how very quickly you find that people sometimes want to hang on to their trauma. And so many times we're doing healings, and next thing I know, somebody is sitting towards the back of the room, and I say, are you all right? And they go, yeah, I just got a little pressure in my head. I just kind of wanted to stay away from the group. And they said, well, would you like me to give you a healing? Oh, no, I'm fine. It's like, oh, and next week, you know, they're not going to show up. It's like, that's it. They're done. It's like, you got to a point where it scared them because they depend on that. They fully identify with whatever trauma they have going on.
You know, I know a woman, a great woman, a very public woman out there, and she has so much talent. Oh my God, astrology, astronomy. I mean, she's a great speaker. And she has so much energy in her field, and she loves to be noticed, and she shares everything. And that's become her relationship. And there's been many times where I've had private conversations. I'm like, do you want me to look at this? Do you want me to, can I suggest? And it's always, no. it's a hard no. And that's fine. I mean, we're friends. I'm going to offer that. But it's painful to watch her spiraling and being in agony and then posting everything that's happening in her world, because she really is a dear, darling, sweetheart, you know, at the end of the day, like most people are deeply. And she's made a decision. There's a soul contract somewhere, an energy contract, where she's going to continue to suffer and suffer and suffer and suffer in every single area of her life. She will not allow anyone's energy to come in and look and maybe see what's there and help her. It's a shutdown. The people wonder why they're having so much upset, agony, trauma, loss, pain, heartbreak, because they will not allow themselves to say, hey, maybe I need some help here.
And sometimes, yes, sometimes you can't change them. Sometimes it takes a little while. I had a young lady who was pregnant, and she came to me and she said, take a look at this agreement, see what you think. So I give her a little reading on the agreement, and she goes, well, that's not the daughter I wanted. I said, okay. She said, that was a vision I had when I was like 18. Now I'm 28. That's not the daughter I want now. I said, well, I don't know what to tell you. I didn't make this crap up. I don't have any idea, but I'll tell you what. I will set up a reading and a line with 4 people. I won't be in it. And you can go see them, no charge, and go see them and see what they have to say. Well, she was out of Cuba, so she was out of Santa Maria stuff, right? And so she went in and she saw them. They told her exact same thing, I guess, that I told her about this beautiful child that she was going to have, but she had a kind of a feisty, ornery, independent young girl, and she didn't want that. At 28, she wanted some, you know, a little girl that does whatever she's told, I guess. So anyway, she was leaving my center, and I'm sitting there talking to a couple of people. And she turned around and she throws this energy at me, and I could feel the energy coming. I put my arm out like this, and it hit my shoulder. I didn't want to hit these people. It hit my shoulder, went down my arm, and erupted and started bleeding down my hand. And blood was dripping off my hand. And the women said, what happened to you? And it says, oh, I bumped it yesterday and it must have opened up. I lied. Because she was so mad, right? It was really kind of interesting. It was almost lost the baby. I got a phone call from the hospital 2 weeks later. She was in a hospital, and she said, I apologize. Can you save the baby? I said, yeah, I can save the baby. Yep, no problem. But you're going to have to make an agreement that you're going to be a decent mom. She goes, I hate you. I said, I understand that. So she did. She raised a little girl. They had a wonderful time together. The little girl was most certainly one of those into everything type person. And mom was on the run all the time, keeping pace with her, but they enjoyed it. They really did. Wow. And so it was really fun to see that. So sometimes there's a blessing that comes out of it and sometimes not, right?
There is. And again, talking of blessings and obviously managing people's expectations, it's my decision to be concerned. I'm very concerned about many people out there. And they're so easily spun out on a phrase like that. Somebody's pregnant, they decide, I don't want this child. What they're doing is affecting the relationship, the soul contract, the soul agreement.
Right.
And then whatever transpired between you and that lady, the child is clearly in a position where it's looking to leave, you know, and that's intention on both sides. And you were able to energetically affect the baby being and the mother, but you are not someone who's out there every day saving children who are at the point of miscarriage, just to make that point, because I have never seen right now people, Dr. Chris, out there who will hear that one thing that you just said and then think you're going to be their savior. So I just want to save the pain on both sides, you know, and help people think, it's really ramped up to a level I've never seen. Another reason why you and I are talking, so we can give people some tools, you know, to help themselves.
Yeah, you know, it's very interesting. Of course, the baby was not the problem. The mother was the problem. And she was trying to manage things. Once again, it's it's about looking at influence and playing with influence and not having control of everything. Control is a nemesis because to have control means that you're discounting everyone else as less than. And that's most certainly a quality that we would call racism or something, right? No, that's not what we're all about. It's about, can we have an influence in this? All you got to do to a child is be able to hold them or talk to them, be nice, and they just come around, right? It's just a piece of cake. That is the easiest thing in the world. Getting an angry mother to calm down is another whole story. I had a lady one time, I was visiting someone. I had a lady come over and she was holding a small child, a preschooler, in her hands, and it was blood all over the front of the little girl's dress. And the mother's like, just hysterical. And she comes running over and like, and she was just couldn't make a word. And I looked at the little girl and I said, give her to me. And she handed her to me. She got my shirt all bloody. It's like, she handed it to me and I said, what did you do to your lip? And the little girl's kind of like all panicky. And I said, no, hey, I'm talking to you. Pay attention to me. What'd you do to your lip? And she goes, I said, yeah, stop that bleeding. And I says, just stop it. Just make it stop. So she smiles a little bit, says, now, does that feel better? It's not bleeding? I said, bleeding's important. It washes the wound, but we're done bleeding. You got blood all over everything. You don't need to bleed anymore. That's fine. Stop the bleeding. And so we're just talking. And I said, what's your favorite toy? And we're having a conversation and she's giggling and talking and the mother's all freaking out over there. So finally she comes down and I tell the mother, why don't you go get a rag and come on back so we'll clean your daughter up. She'll feel better cleaned up and I'll hold her. So when we come back, I had a conversation. Guess what? The mother was a nurse. She freaked so much when her daughter was bleeding from a little tiny cut. She bumped into something, nothing, but panic throws you into some silliness that's just ridiculous. She freaked out the little girl thinking she was dying or something. It's like, it was way over the top. It was just a question of bringing it all into peace. And then I give the little girl back and the lady said, oh, what do I owe you? And I said, you don't owe me anything, but you owe that little girl a lot. So really tell her what a wonderful job she did of healing herself, right? That's what's profound. It's like, that's just kind of amazing, right?
It is amazing. You hear it so often. It doesn't matter what we're trained in. When it happens to us, or if there's a child that we're connected, you know, everything goes out the window, and then we transfer fright frequency. We transfer our pictures at times to children without meaning to, and they're like, well, what do I do here? You know, you remind me of Rasputin, but that's for a whole other conversation. But someone like Rasputin, who was very involved with the Romanovs, the Russian royal family, and their little boy Nikolai, who was a hemophiliac, and that whatever it was that Rasputin was able to communicate to little Nikolai to stop his hemophilia, which in those days, they didn't have the right medicine or technology, whatever, to stop. But once you convince a child of their own ability to heal or to defend, I trained one little 4-year-old girl years ago, went to the house, did a blessing, there was so much energy in this house, but it was after the little girl's light.
Right.
So something bumped in my office here. And I told the little girl to whatever comes to match it, to yell at it. For this particular child, it was the right information. Not every child is the same. No. And the mother said she woke up screaming. The child woke up screaming. The mother ran in the room. And the little girl saying to the mother, Mummy, there's a black man, meaning a black figure. And the mummy said to her, right, what are you going to do about it? And the little 4-year-old leant forward on her knees and went at the energy that was there. And then she sat back and started laughing. And mom said, what? And then the little girl said, he ran home to his mama, because I convinced the child that she was in charge and that was a naughty boy pretending to be bigger than he was, trying to scare, and that she had the power, and it worked. And that is hands to the gods, a true story. So it's amazing how we can influence our littles, and their imagination is everything, and we use that to bring the information to make us even more powerful.
Yes, it is very, very intriguing. I had a guy I'd done some work with children, and he was a psychologist, prison psychologist, and I'd been working with prisoners solving cases. Then he had a boy and a girl, two small kids, actually about a year and a half apart. And somebody who had been a child molester and was in prison for life had managed to walk away. And so the two kids found this guy and they brought him in. And their father, I was there in their father's office. And their father, when the kids walk in, they said, you know, so-and-so, your prisoner, was out wandering around. We saw him in the forest and we brought him in. And their dad said, what, did he hurt you? Did he do anything? And they go, oh, no, he's not going to hurt us. We just told him he's not supposed to be there. And you come with us. We're taking you back. You're not supposed to be out here. And it's just like the guy just followed him back in, turned himself in. Like, it's amazing because their level of confidence and certainty, it was like there was no victimhood for their world. It was like, no, you're wrong, and we're going to straighten this out. They had all the power. It was like profound. And, you know, their dad is looking at me like, I said, hey, I think you did a good job with your kids, right? Not a problem, right? So it's like, wow, that's pretty good, right? And so, yeah, so it's interesting. We see this stuff and it's beautiful, right? And we live on this planet, and I think that what we do is because we have an interest in this, we attract this. So we sit and we experience all this. I've been on trips already touring with people and having all these profound experiences, and no one else has any clue. Nobody, you know. I was on a trip one time, getting on off the bus. There was a guy that had a hip problem, and he was having a hard time walking up down the steps. So we were, I don't know where, we were in some country, I think of Thailand, and there was a guy playing a musical instrument, and I was asking him questions about it. And so he took a liking to me because I was paying attention to him. So he said, I have a gift for you. Bring your friends and I'll come over and I'll do a reading for you. And he said, but my English is not very good, so you have to translate. And I'm thinking, I don't speak their language at all. I'm not sure what this means, but I went with it. So I took this whole group over. So he takes a guy with the hip problems and he sits the guy down, and he's a spiritualist. So he's got all his material in French. And I'm in Thailand. All the stuff is in French. And I have no damn idea what he's saying in Thai or French, but I know exactly what he's doing, right? So he can see that in me. So I'm translating to this guy, and I'm saying, the reason you're crippled is because you're very mad at your daughter, you're upset with her, and so much animosity in there has made you rigid. You won't give in. That's what he's telling the guy. We get back on a bus, and the guy walks on a bus, no problem. And Deborah and I were sitting in the back of the bus. He'd come back and sat with me. And he's like, now he's my buddy. You know, 2 days later, he's having a hard time getting up the step. He's not sitting with me anymore. Doesn't even talk to me. And now he's pissed at me.
Wow.
Isn't that amazing? So
I've seen that.
Some people can have the healing and some people cannot, right? It's just like that.
But
it was amazing to see him walk.
Wow. And it would mean that he would have to face the stuck energy. Was it on the left, the female side, where all the female issues are?
You got it.
Yeah. So, and then that's your opportunity for your human potential to acknowledge. And a lot of parents, they just cannot handle being wrong. But they've raised their kids, a lot of them, without telling their kids what they're doing right. They haven't learned to disarm, you know, and have that opening. They're like, neat, you know, you cannot go anywhere with a child, however old, even in their 30s. If you don't start with what they're doing right, it's easy. Right.
You got to be able to, you've got to be able to show a relationship between their potential and value in the world. Your potential gives you these skills. And so once they get that, then it feels like as they imagine potential, they can integrate that into a skill level and have value in the world. If they don't get that lesson, then they're just stumped with imagined things that are all fantasy and it goes nowhere. And then they're lost in fantasy all the time. And next thing you know, they're playing video games 24 hours a day, right? Because that's all there is, right? This is the only game, right? So it's very, very sad. And I've never worked with kids on that level. I've worked with military people on that level. And so it was just, you know, getting them off of that and getting them engaged in life. I had 12 guys in the military, and I took them all a knife and a piece of wood. And I said, we're going to sit around in a circle and we're going to carve something. And they're all looking at me like, this is stupid. I said, no, you're stupid. What have you done with your life? Carve something, make something. This is your opportunity. They weren't very good at it, but nonetheless, they all were carving, and they all had a pile of wood on the floor. They were carving away. And by the time they got done, it was like, wow, that was convenient. And then they had something to take home, right? And so it was them engaging in something. Well, that was just a first meeting. But after that, then they started seeing it's like they needed to create something in the world and not something in their fantasy that keeps them in pain and keeps them in a mental institution where a psychologist has got to come talk to them, right? It's like the world changes, and that's exactly what it is. It's like, what does it take to integrate that?
Yeah, it can be one small task or one small action, like, something as simple as when you get up in the morning, make your bed.
Right.
Don't just get out and because everywhere you go in your house, you're going to be seeing the chaos that's inside you.
Right.
Where you try to put some structure, make the bed, wash up the dishes, a little bit of organization, no matter how overwhelmed you are, one little action to change the month before. Every day, same thing, every day, same thing. Just even sometimes pulling flowers out the garden, putting them in a vase, having something else more vulnerable than you is helpful to help someone shift.
Right. Yes. Any relationship you put into that is like, this is my task, this is my job. All of a sudden, you're putting extra into life, you get more out of it. And the extra investment is really an investment in your potential, right? Because that was not something you had to do. That was a potential you could do.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what it is. And it's like, yeah, most certainly. And when I'm working with friends and around and they're working with me and I'm doing some type of project, when I'm all done, I'm putting all my tools away and they go, what are you putting your tools away? You got another project you're working on. I said, I stop a project, I put everything away, I'm done with it, and then I start the next. That's what I do. I said, it's the only thing that gives me completion, right? And so that way it's off the chart. Otherwise, I'm not thinking about something else. It's all separate.
Right. It's good. It's like closing energy frequency, closing that loop, and then opening up.
Right. And opening up. Right.
Oh my goodness, we have been going for over an hour here, but I just love talking to you. And I just know that you bring so much value to my channel, my beautiful channel with so many other beautiful people. Is there anything that you feel we should share kind of at the end of our conversation today?
No, I think we've covered a lot of things. We really have. And I think that you have a whole repertoire of things. And if people watching your channel, if they're struggling with something, all they've got to do is email you and say, hey, I got a little bit of an issue here. Same thing I do. I tell people, hey, you got a question, bounce a question off of me. Like, it's not a problem, right? I don't know how many times people say, well, I don't understand this. So I just send them some literature. I send them some material, right? I said, no, I don't want to do workshops. I don't want to teach anymore. I retired, right? And I'm not sure what that means yet, but most certainly it just means something different, right? We have to take bites into life. I can remember when I closed my center down, people come over and said, why are you closing? I said, because I'm done. They said, you're just going to leave? And I said, yeah, I'm going to pack up. I'm going to move. I'm going to leave. Well, what are you going to do? That's a good question. You get to figure it out. Call me gone. Bye. I'm done. So I didn't leave because of any other reason other than the fact that I was done.
Yeah.
Right? How many cycles do we have to walk away from because we're done? Jobs or whatever else. Jobs, relationships, all the above. It's like, okay, I'm done.
Yeah.
Right?
I think, right there, the biggest lesson is I'm currently not in practice. I'm not practicing as a therapist or even a spiritual mentor. I give so much free on my channel, and my clinic is currently offline. And I'm not open to 100 emails a day at the moment. I don't have the bandwidth for it at this moment in my life because of other work that I'm doing to support my brothers and my sisters in the world. But I know people can, email you. I'll put your email there. But also, if people could just understand that we are not their personal saviors, they are.
Right.
They are.
Right.
There's like
Well,
15 different videos on my channel. You know, like for the guys out there, you go to a channel, you go to the top bar and you click on videos, and everyone's video drops down in front of you. You and I have got like 4 or 5 broadcasts like this, giving tons of
right.
tools. I also have one-to-one free therapy sessions, and I'm
Yeah.
not going to copy and paste the link.
Right. I know.
The
Yeah.
information is there. It's not my job. I'm in service, and you know, we are not, they're getting out of looking for a god, a leader, a personal savior, a president, a king, a commander, you know,
Right.
it's here.
Right.
It's
It
here.
is. Right. Yeah. And sometimes, sometimes you need just to take someone's hand and walk them across the street. That's all it really takes, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I don't mind that. If they've got a big drama going on, they think I'm going to solve it, they're in big trouble because I just don't answer them anymore. That's the nice thing about retired. I just go retired. But if somebody comes in and said, I don't quite understand this, I don't quite get this, or like I had a friend of mine say, I got sick, then my cat got sick and died. Then I got sick again, and my dog got sick and died. And so now I'm getting sick again. I'm worried about my cat. I said, okay, fine. I will communicate with your cat. So don't worry about it. And so I heard a couple of weeks later, I moved and got treatment. He had a continuing ailment that would come in cycles, whatever it was, I don't remember. But bottom line, he goes like, it was amazing. My cat sleeps in my room at night. We're really close. Whatever you did, my cat would not come in my room, would not come near me. The cat just said, I'm staying away from you for a while. And the cat is just doing fine. So, it's like I was feeling bad killing my pets. And he said, now all of a sudden I realized that, oh, they were actually trying to heal me and they died. It's like, wow, it's just kind of interesting. So I appreciate them even more than I ever have before, right? So
Such a tough one.
sometimes it's just that simple, right? And it's sometimes not, and sometimes people got a drinking problem or a drug problem. It's like, way too many hours. It isn't going to work on the phone, right? I
Yeah,
can't talk to you once a
definitely.
month and have something happen here, right? It
Right,
really
right.
takes a lot of energy.
Just in closing, with the people that unfortunately go into an addictive cycle for whatever that might be, drugs, alcohol, weed, cigarettes, I don't know. For me, I have huge compassion because I understand that addictive cycle, that obsessive compulsive. Like for me, if I can't get into Netflix series because
Yeah.
I don't want to be owned by it. I learned this when I was in my early 20s. I'd try and rush home and watch the Days of Our Lives, and then I
Right.
realized that I was putting everything on the line to get to Days of Our Lives. I'm like, I have to stop. So I recognize a bad cycle. If I'm not careful, it's going to own me. But I honestly believe that the most broken people on our planet, the most addicted, the most wounded, they really are, some of them, the brightest lights and the most brilliant. And they're so discarded, but when they have an opportunity, some of them won't always accept the help that's there, or they might for a while. And so I do have compassion for everybody, really.
Right. Yeah. So I like to give them a chance no matter what. So that's why if I get an email from someone, I usually answer and say, okay, what's going on? And can I help you? Can I not? And that's where I go. Or do I have an answer for you? Or do I have a technique or something you can play with? And that's pretty much where I sit right now today in life. It's just like, yeah, whatever can I share? So it's just been fun, right? And
Great.
so somewhere when I get back, I've got some traveling coming up, but somewhere when I get back around, maybe I'll do another one later on this year.
Absolutely.
And so it'd be interesting. So we'll see what ideas. I've got to run down to get to my age, everybody we know is dying. So it seems like I go to more funerals than anything.
Oh my God.
But somewhere in a funeral and somewhere some time with the Indians and some other adventures I got coming down the pike. And I've got a few talks in Denver to do. So it'll be interesting to see what unfolds and come July or August, somewhere around in there, when we get back in So this has been exciting.
Yeah, and for me too. And I'm so grateful to you spending time with us yet again, giving us metaphysical tools, techniques, things to think about in terms of our human potential. Dr. Chris Lemmon, you are a legend, and I will see you soon. And to you guys out there, thank you for watching. I do hope that you'll take some time maybe to re-listen to this or re-watch this and make some notes for yourself, maybe have a friend try some energy with and see where you can actually move yourself forward, or not. Either way, my name is Dani Henderson. I send you my love, and I will see you soon.
Thank you.